The Jared Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is the Jared Dillian Show. Kind of interesting day in the markets today. Oil was down a lot. Well, not so much oil, but energy stocks. And the market was down a lot. Market was down 900 points at one point, and it rallied up to down 500, and tech stocks finished in the green again. So it just never ends. I'm going to tell you a story. Story time. You know, when I worked at Lehman Brothers, a lot of people really liked working at Lehman Brothers. And there was this phrase that people had. They said you bleed Lehman green. The green was the color of the firm. And it wasn't a cult. It absolutely was not a cult. But, you know, people were very patriotic about that firm. They really enjoyed working there. They loved working there. And, you know, for the most part, people got along great. And they just had very positive feelings about the company they worked at, you know. They believed in Lehman Brothers. They believed that one day Lehman would pass Morgan Stanley and pass Goldman Sachs and become the United States' largest investment bank. We were scrappy. We had a chip on our shoulder. We're going to get these guys, and that was our. It was a pretty special place to work. It was a pretty special place to work. Now, if you worked at Lehman Brothers and you worked in, you know, some capacity where you were in a risk-taking role, you got compensated with a lot of stock. So I was a vice president, and I got, I think, 25% of my compensation in stock. You know, so I'm pretty transparent about the money that I made there. It's in my book. It's in Street Freak. So for a couple of years, I made $850,000, and 25% of $850,000 is $212,500. That was stock, okay? Now, I mean, that's real money, but you don't get to see that money for 5 years. The stock is restricted, okay? It's called restricted stock. And the thing about Lehman was that we had a 5-year lockup on the stock where every other bank on Wall Street had a 3-year lockup. 5 years is a long time. So I worked there for 7 years. So the stock I got in my first year vested in year 6, and I was able to sell it then. And the stock that I got in my second year vested in year 7, and I was able to sell it then. And then all the rest of the stock went to zero. And since I wasn't getting paid much in year 1 and year 2, it was just a tiny amount of stock. So really the bulk of my compensation was this stock that I got in year 2 through 7, and it all went to zero. It was worthless. So we're going to talk about the risk management aspect of this in a second. You know, at the top, in 2007, I had about $500,000 worth of stock. Now, that's a lot of money to a lot of people, but there were some people that had way more than that. I know a guy that had $25 million in Lehman stock. All went to zero. So, yeah, good times, good times. So my philosophy on this was to sell the stock whenever I had the chance. Because so much of my net worth, about 25% of my net worth, was tied up in this stock, and I didn't need any more risk. I didn't need any more Lehman risk. I had enough Lehman risk. And if you think about it, like my whole life was tied up in that company. Not only did I have all this stock, but I worked there too. So if something happened to the firm, I lost the stock and I lost my job. So I really had a strong incentive to diversify away from this risk. You know, I lost $500,000 at the bankruptcy, and that was a big hickey. Losing 25% of my net worth all at once. And the rest of my portfolio got hammered too because it was the financial crisis. So I really lost like 50%. That was not fun. It would have been nice if I didn't have so much stock in my employer. It would have been nice if I didn't have so much stock in my employer. Think about this. I had 25% of my net worth in the same company where I worked. So if the company went bankrupt, not only did I lose my job, I lost 25% of my wealth. But actually, for me, it wasn't that bad. I was a vice president. Now, senior vice presidents had even more stock, and managing directors had even more stock, and they also got options. So Lehman managing directors routinely got 75% of their compensation in stock or options, which was fine when the stock was going up. That worked for a really, really long time. And on top of all this, in the 401k plan, if you looked at the investment options in the 401k plan, one of them was Lehman Brothers stock, which you could buy at a discount. I think you could buy it at a 10% discount. So there were people, I knew some of these people that were, they had the stock that they got in their bonuses. They worked at this company and they were buying even more stock in their 401k. I'm like, are you people insane? You're just putting it all on red. Putting it all on red. And I was like, no way in hell am I doing that. I'm not putting Lehman stock in my 401k. Now, of course, all the other banks were saved or bailed out. So Bear Stearns was... Now, a lot of people think Bear Stearns went bankrupt. Technically, it didn't. It did, but it didn't. Instead of going bankrupt, the Fed told J.P. Morgan to buy Bear Stearns at $2 a share. They eventually revised the price up to $10 a share. So Bear Stearns was bought by J.P. Morgan. There's still Bear Stearns people kicking around J.P. Morgan. Merrill Lynch was bought by B of A. B of A was also asked to buy Countrywide, which was a disaster. But Lehman was the only firm that was allowed to fail. And a lot of people don't know their financial history. I do run into people occasionally that say, Lehman got bailed out. And I'm like, I worked there. I think I would have remembered if we got bailed out. I would still have my stock. But no, Lehman did not get bailed out. It was the only firm that was allowed to fail. And it's really been the only thing that was allowed to fail in the last 12 years. Nothing else has been allowed to fail. All these companies with COVID, the airlines and the hotels and the casinos and everything else, they weren't allowed to fail. Nothing has been allowed to fail. The only thing that's been allowed to fail in the last 12 years was Lehman Brothers, and that's what started that response. Was that the failure of Lehman Brothers was so awful and had such ripple effects throughout the economy that said we can't let anything fail, anything again. Everything is systemically important. That's where we are today. Now, Barclays, which is a British bank, did buy the broker-dealer operation out of the holding company. So Lehman was a holding company. Barclays bought the broker-dealer operation out of the holding company. So a lot of the investment bank employees got to keep their jobs. I could have kept my job, but I quit. Anyway, the right amount of stock to own in your company is pretty low. I would say 10% of your net worth. And anytime you get stock that vests, you want to sell it and turn it into food. And it's just a matter of risk management. I mean, if you're constructing a portfolio, and we've talked about portfolio construction before, and the weights that you assign to the positions in the portfolio, you don't want too big of a position because it's going to dominate the returns and it's going to generate a lot of volatility. We've talked about position sizing before. And how do you decide what weight you want something to have in your portfolio? Well, it depends. It depends on a lot of things, but it depends on your conviction. It depends on how strongly you feel about that particular position. Now, in the case of company stock, you're not unless you're a director or an officer or something like that, you're not technically an insider, but you do kind of have inside information on your company. And I can tell you when Lehman Brothers, in the summer of 2008, like I said, I didn't have inside information, but in fact, I really had no information. The information I had was that the stock kept going down every day, and our clients kept telling us that we were going to go bankrupt. But, I just kind of had a sense that things weren't going to go right. So you do kind of have inside information. And you have to ask yourself, do you think that your company is the best investment out there? Maybe not. Now, I have a 30% position in my portfolio, and that's gold and gold miners. The biggest position I have in individual stock is about 4%. And given the fact that you have correlation That's what this is. It's correlation. Not only do you own the stock, you work there too, so you really have to be careful about loading up on a bunch of stock. Now, people did this at Enron. And, the one thing I will say about Lehman Management is they sort of discouraged people from buying more stock. But at Enron, they encouraged people to buy more Enron stock. And there were lots and lots of employees, a huge percentage of the employees that had stock in their 401k. They had Enron stock everywhere, and they were totally ruined. And I suppose this is one of the nice things about working in a small business. This is part of a larger discussion on portfolio management. You really have to be careful with position sizes. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about a guy who took Tesla and he made it 50% of his portfolio. That is not good risk management. And that worked. It worked until it didn't work, but it is not good risk management. And if you do that, you are going to have breathtaking volatility. And this is a lot of stress that you don't need. And all of our discussions come down to financial stress. And the sources of financial stress are debt and risk. This is the risk part. I mean, sure, there are people out there who want to experience financial stress. Hedge fund managers, VCs, not you. You have enough stress in your life. You don't have to take huge amounts of risk to retire comfortably. You can do the awesome portfolio, and we'll talk about the awesome portfolio sometime later tonight. I'm Jared Dillian. This is The Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.